Trump-era tariffs struck down and silver spikes. Here is the real story. You have probably seen the headlines by now. They scream chaos 1 minute and celebration the next. And if you are an investor or someone who is simply trying to protect the wealth you have spent a lifetime building, that noise can be overwhelming. It can make you feel like you are constantly one step behind, like the game is rigged and the rules change when you are not looking. But here is the truth that the mainstream financial media will never tell you. Moments like this are not designed to confuse you. They are designed to test you. They test your patience, your discipline, and most importantly, your ability to separate the signal from the noise. So in this video, we are going to separate what is real from what is just hype. By the end, you will walk away feeling calmer, clearer, and far more confident about what you are actually buying. And more importantly, why you are buying it today is Sunday, February 23rd, 2025. New York Time, drop a comment below and let me know the exact day and date you are watching this from. I love seeing where and when you are tuning in. And real quick, if you appreciate content that is built from scratch, thoughtfully researched, and never copied, support the channel by subscribing and commenting Henry's Market HQ below. It helps this channel grow more than you think, and I truly appreciate it. Now let us get into the full breakdown of what just happened, because if you understand the mechanics beneath the surface, you will never be afraid of the headlines again. You will start to see them for what they truly are, opportunities wrapped in fear and confusion. So what exactly happened here? It sounds complicated, but it is actually very simple. The Supreme Court made a major move regarding a set of tariffs that were originally put in place during the Trump administration. Now, tariffs, for those who might not be fully familiar, are essentially taxes that one country places on goods coming in from another country. They are designed to protect domestic industries by making foreign goods more expensive, but they also create friction in global trade, and that friction has consequences that ripple through supply chains, pricing, and ultimately through the value of assets like silver and gold. When this news broke that these tariffs were essentially struck down or dismantled, the market did what it always does when faced with uncertainty. It moved, and it moved fast. But here is the part that most people miss. The market does not move because of the event itself. It moves because of how the event changes. Expectations. And expectations are the invisible hands that guide every single price tag on every single chart you have ever looked at. When the Supreme Court made this ruling, it wasn't just about tariffs. It was about the signal. That signal told traders and institutions that the landscape of trade policy had just shifted, and in that shift, there is always a winner and a loser. The question is, which one are you going to be? Now let us talk about silver specifically, because that is where things get really interesting. Silver jumped almost immediately after the news broke, and if you are someone who follows these markets closely, you know that silver does not always react the way logic would dictate. Sometimes it lags, sometimes it leads, and sometimes it just sits there while everything else moves around it. But this time it jumped, and it jumped with conviction. Why? Because silver is not just a metal. It is a barometer. It is a tool that measures fear and confidence at the same time. Unlike gold, which is often seen as the ultimate store of value, silver has one foot in the financial world and one foot in the industrial world. It is used in everything from solar panels to medical devices to the circuitry, in the very device you are watching this video on right now. So when trade policy shifts, when tariffs are removed or added, it changes the cost structure of every single industry that relies on that metal, and that changes demand expectations, and that changes price. But here is where the real story begins, and where most people will check out, because it requires thinking not just about today, but about tomorrow. The removal of these tariffs does not exist in a vacuum. It happens at a moment in history where the world is already reordering itself in ways that most people have not yet fully grasped. We are watching the slow but steady decline of the petrodollar system. We are watching nations like China and Russia and Brazil actively toutlun alternatives to the US dollar for international trade. We are watching central banks around the world buy gold at a pace we have not seen since the 1970s. And silver, despite its industrial uses, is still money. It always has been, and it always will be. So when you see a headline like this, and you see a spike in silver, you have to ask yourself the deeper question: is is this just a one-off reaction to a court ruling? Or is this another crack in the dam that holds back the flood of monetary debasement that has been building for decades? The answer is both, and that is what makes this moment so important. If you only look at the surface, you will trade based on noise, and you will lose. If you look beneath the surface, you will invest based on signal, and you will win, not overnight, but consistently over time. And that consistency is what builds real wealth. Not luck, not timing, not gambling, but understanding the game well enough to know that the scoreboard is misleading and that the real game is happening in the minds of people who think in years, not minutes. So take a breath right now and just let that sink in, because what I just told you is not something you will hear on cable news. They need you to be emotional. They need you to be afraid, because fear keeps you watching, and watching keeps their business model alive. But you are here because you want more than that. You want clarity, and clarity is exactly what we are going to keep building together. In the next part of this video, we are going to go even deeper into what this ruling actually means for your portfolio and why the spike in silver might just be the beginning of something much larger. But before we do that, I need you to do something for me. I need you to pause for just 1 second and ask yourself a question, a real question, not the kind you ask when you are bored, but the kind that actually matters. When you look at your savings, when you look at your investments, when you look at the cash sitting in your bank account, do you truly feel protected? Do you feel like you are ahead of the curve? Or do you feel like you are just hoping that things work out? Because hope is not a strategy. And if you are hoping right now, it is time to start learning instead. And that is exactly what this channel is for. So when you are ready, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications, because we are not here to follow the crowd. We are here to think for ourselves. And that, my friend, is the only edge that still works in this game. Now let us move forward together into the next layer of this story, because the surface has been scratched, but the truth is still buried underneath, and we are going to dig it up right now. Now let us go deeper, because this is where most people stop paying attention, and that is exactly when the smart money starts moving, in silence. You see, the Supreme Court ruling on those Trump-era tariffs is not just a legal decision. It is a signal that the rules of the game are shifting, and when the rules shift, the players who were winning before are not guaranteed to win again. In fact, history shows us that the greatest transfers of wealth in human history have always happened during moments like this. Moments when the majority is distracted by headlines and the minority is focused on the underlying mechanics. So let us talk about what this ruling actually changes, and more importantly, what it does not change, because understanding the difference is what separates the investor from the speculator. The speculator sees a headline and thinks, trade war over tariffs gone silver up, time to buy. The investor sees the same headline and thinks, okay, what does this reveal about the current state of the judicial system? What does it say about the balance of power between branches of government? And how does that affect the long-term reliability of policy going forward? Do you see the difference? One is emotional and reactionary, the other is strategic and calculated, and in the world of wealth, building calculation always wins over emotion in the long run. So let us break down the specifics of what happened without getting lost in legal jargon, because you do not need to be a lawyer to understand this. You just need to think clearly. The tariffs in question were originally imposed under the argument of national security. That is a specific legal pathway that gives the executive branch enormous power to bypass normal congressional oversight and act quickly in the name of protecting the country from external threats. Now, whether you agree with that use of power or not is not the point. The point is that the Supreme Court essentially said that this particular use of that power went too far or was improperly applied, and in doing so they sent a message that the executive branch does not have unlimited authority to reshape trade policy without checks and balances. Now that might sound like a win for free trade, and in some ways it is, but here is where it gets complicated. The same court that struck down these tariffs is the same court that has made other decisions in recent years that have expanded executive power in different areas. So this is not a simple story of good guys and bad guys. It is a story of complexity, and complexity is the enemy of the person who wants easy answers, but it is the friend of the person who wants real understanding, because real understanding comes from embracing complexity, not running from it. So what does this mean for silver specifically? Well, silver, like all precious metals, has a unique relationship with uncertainty. When uncertainty rises, silver often rises with it, but not always, and not for the reasons most people think. Silver is not just reacting to the tariff news itself, it is reacting to what the tariff news represents. It represents a breakdown in the normal functioning of government. It represents the fact that policy, which was assumed to be stable, can be overturned in an instant. And when that happens, the perception of risk changes across every single asset class. The bond market looks at this and thinks, if trade policy can be overturned so easily, what about tax policy? What about spending policy? What about the full faith and credit of the United States government? And when those questions start being asked, the value of hard assets like silver and gold starts to look a lot more attractive, not because they pay interest, not because they generate cash flow, but because they do not rely on anyone's promise to retain their value. They simply are what they are, and in a world where promises are becoming increasingly unreliable, that simplicity becomes priceless. Now let us add another layer to this, because the story gets even more interesting when you consider the timing. We are sitting here in February of 2025, and the global economic landscape is fragile in ways that most people do not fully appreciate. We have record levels of government debt in virtually every developed nation. We have central banks that have printed money at a pace that would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. We have a geopolitical environment where the idea of a peaceful, stable world order is being questioned openly by leaders and citizens alike, and into this environment comes a Supreme Court ruling that throws a wrench into the trade policy machinery, and the market reacts, and then the media reports on the reaction, and then the cycle continues. But here is the question that nobody is asking loud enough: what if this is not an isolated event? What if this is part of a pattern? What if we are watching the slow unraveling of the post-World War II economic order that has defined global prosperity for generations? And if that is true, and there is plenty of evidence to suggest it might be, then a spike in silver today is not just a trading opportunity. It is a warning sign. It is a canary in the coal mine, and the canary is singing loudly, but most people are too busy looking at their phones to hear it. Now, I want you to imagine something for a moment. I want you to imagine that you are not watching this video in 2025, but that you are watching it 10 years from now, and you are looking back at this moment, and you are trying to remember what it felt like to live through it. Would you remember the headlines? Would you remember the specific Supreme Court ruling, or the exact percentage that silver moved in a single day? Probably not, but you would remember whether you paid attention or whether you got distracted. You would remember whether you used moments like this to build something lasting, or whether you let them pass by while you worried about things that did not matter. And that is the real suspense here. Not whether silver goes up or down next week, but whether you are building the mindset and the knowledge base that allows you to navigate whatever comes next. Because make no mistake, something is coming next. There is always something next. That is the nature of markets and the nature of life itself. Change is the only constant, and the only question that matters is whether you are ready for it when it arrives. So let me ask you directly right now in this moment, are you ready? Do you have a plan? Do you understand why you own what you own? Or are you just hoping that things work out? Because hoping is not a plan, and it never has been. If you do not have a plan, then what we are doing right now in this video is more important than you might realize, because we are building the foundation of that plan together. We are learning to think not just about what is happening, but about why it is happening and what it means for the future. And that kind of thinking is rare. It is valuable, and it is the only thing that will protect you when the noise gets loud and the fear gets real. So as we move into the final part of this video, I want you to hold on to that idea. Hold on to the understanding that you are not just consuming content. You are training your mind to see what others miss, and that training pays dividends, not just in money, but in peace of mind. And peace of mind is the one thing that no amount of money can buy if you do not have it. So let us go forward together into the final piece of this puzzle, because the story is not over yet, and the most important lessons are still ahead of us right now. Now we arrive at the final and most important part of this journey, because understanding what happened and why it matters is only half the battle. The other half, and frankly the more difficult half, is knowing what to do about it. And more importantly, what not to do about it. Because in moments of market movement, the greatest danger is not the movement itself. It is the impulse to move with it without thinking, the impulse to react without understanding, the impulse to let fear or greed make decisions that your future self will have to live with. And that is exactly what we are going to protect you from right now. So let us talk about what this Supreme Court ruling and the subsequent silver spike actually means for your portfolio and for your peace of mind. Going forward, The first thing you need to understand is that single-day moves in any asset class are almost always meaningless in the grand scheme of things. They feel meaningful, they feel urgent, they feel like you need to do something right now. But that feeling is a trap. It is the oldest trap in the financial world, and it catches more people than almost any other mistake you can make when you see a spike in silver or a drop in stocks or any dramatic movement. The instinct is to assign meaning to it, to assume that it represents a fundamental change that requires immediate action. But here is the truth that professional traders know, and that most retail investors never learn. Most daily moves are just noise. They are the market breathing. They are the result of algorithms interacting with each other. They are the product of emotional traders making emotional decisions. And if you let that noise dictate your actions, you will end up buying high and selling low over and over again until your account is empty and your confidence is shattered. So what should you do? Instead, you should think in terms of trends, not days. You should ask yourself, not what happened today, but what has been happening for months, and what is likely to happen for years. And when you look at silver through that lens, a very different picture emerges. The daily spike is interesting, but it is not the story. The story is that silver has been in a consolidation pattern for years, while central banks have been printing money at historic levels, while governments have been piling on debt that can never be repaid, while the dollar has been slowly but steadily losing purchasing power, and yet silver has not exploded higher. Why? Because markets are not always rational. In the short term, they can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent, as the famous saying goes. But that irrationality does not change the underlying fundamentals. It just means that you have to have patience. And patience is the one thing that most people simply do not have. They want results. Now they want confirmation. Now they want to feel smart now. And that need for immediate gratification is exactly what keeps them from ever achieving the kind of wealth that comes from simply holding on to something valuable while everyone else chatters themselves into exhaustion. So let me give you a framework for thinking about this moment and for thinking about every moment like it that will come in the future. The framework is simple, but it is not easy to follow because it requires you to be different than the crowd. And being different than the crowd is lonely, it is uncomfortable, and it often feels wrong, even when it is right. The framework is this: focus on the asset, not the price. Focus on why you own something, not on what someone else is willing to pay for it today. If you own silver, because you understand that it is real money that cannot be printed into oblivion, that has been used as a store of value for Wuqian years of human history, then what does it matter if it goes up or down tomorrow? It matters only in the sense that it gives you an opportunity to buy more if you have the courage and the capital to do so. But it does not change the fundamental thesis. And if the thesis has not changed, then the action should not change either. Now I want to be very clear about something. I am not telling you that silver is guaranteed to go up. I am not telling you that you should put all your money into precious metals and ignore every other asset class. That would be foolish. And I would never advise anyone to be foolish with their hard-earned money. What I am telling you is that you need to have a thesis, a reason for owning what you own, that is independent of what the market does on any given day. And that thesis should be based on things that are true, not things that are popular, things that are true, like the fact that the supply of silver is finite and the demand for it in industrial applications is growing. Things that are true, like the fact that governments throughout history have always debased their currencies, and that citizens who protected themselves by owning real assets have always been better off than those who trusted the paper promises of the state. Things that are true, like the fact that you cannot eat a stock certificate and you cannot heat your home with a bond, but you can do both with an ounce of silver if the worst-case scenario ever comes to pass. Now, I am not predicting the worst-case scenario, and I hope it never comes, but I am also not naive enough to pretend that it cannot happen, because history is filled with examples of sophisticated, advanced civilizations that collapsed under the weight of their own complexity and their own debt and their own unwillingness to tell themselves the truth about the situation they were in. And when those civilizations collapsed, the people who had prepared were not the ones who had the most paper wealth. They were the ones who had the most real wealth, the ones who understood that money is ultimately just a tool for survival, and that the best money is the one that survives the longest. And that is silver, that is gold, that is land, that is productive. Assets that do not depend on the promises of any government or any bank or any institution to retain their value. So as we wrap up this video, I want to leave you with a challenge that goes beyond just understanding this one news event or this one market move. I want you to take what you have learned here and apply it to every financial decision you make from now on. I want you to ask yourself before you buy anything, am I buying this because of the headlines or because of the fundamentals? Am I buying this because I am afraid of missing out or because I truly believe in its long-term value? Am I buying this because someone told me to, or because I have done my own research and come to my own conclusions? Because if you cannot answer those questions honestly and clearly, then you are not investing, you are gambling. And gambling is a game that the house always wins in the long run. But if you can answer those questions, if you can develop a thesis and stick to it through the ups and downs, through the noise and the fear, through the spikes and the crashes, then you are not gambling, you are building. And building is hard. Building takes time. Building requires patience and discipline and the willingness to be wrong in the short term so that you can be right in the long term. But building is also the only way to create something that lasts, the only way to create something that you can pass down to your children and your grandchildren, the only way to create something that stands as a testament to the fact that you paid attention when everyone else was distracted and that you thought for yourself when everyone else was following the crowd. And that, my friend, is the real goal, not just making money, but becoming the kind of person who can be trusted with money, the kind of person who can hold on to it and grow it and use it to create a better life for themselves and for the people they love. And that is exactly what we are here to help you do on this channel every single day. So if you are benefiting from our topics, please subscribe, like, and turn on the bell notification so you can see our new videos early, because we are just getting started and the best is still ahead of us. Thank you for watching. Thank you for thinking, and thank you for being part of this community. Now go out there and make today count. I will see you in the next video.